my thesis on roll call, energy efficient system. So I'll start off with our problem statement.
I think that was a good problem statement for social aspects of wireless.
Um, yeah, yeah. Then we'll have the currently deployed RFID systems today. The challenges faced in design a roll call system, and over the review of the roll call system, the energy optimization that we did in order to make the system feasible, radio link tuning for having reliable radio communication. In the last section, we'll have an experiment which shows how the system will react in case of collisions. We end it with summary and future work. So roll call has been designed to be a monitoring application. So consider an enclosed space with thousands of tagged assets being monitored by one or more base stations which are networked together. Now what I mean by a tag is a radio device which can communicate with the base station. Each of the tag is going to have a unique ID and it is going to transmit this unique ID to the base station. The network readers are connected to some backend device where you have a user display. What we want is to continuously monitor all these assets in real time. So if we consider the tag at the right hand corner, if it was supposed to disappear because of theft or maybe some malfunction, and this message has to be transmitted through the system and some form of alarm is to be raised. So the RFID that we have today is partial asset tracking using handheld readers and a portal. What I mean by a reader is the same thing as a base station. So what a reader does is if a tagged item comes in the vicinity of a reader, the reader knows about its existence. Or if a tagged item passes through a portal, then you know about the existence of that item. The communication protocol which is used here is query response type. It's like the base station will talk first and then the tag will respond back with an answer. Generally, they are of two types: passive tags and passive RFID tags and active RFID tags. Passive tag is one on which there is no battery, so which means that they are cheap, small in size, have a long life, but low read reliability. What a passive tag does is when it comes near a base station, it gets powered up using the power radiated from the base station, and it reflects back the carrier of the base station using backscatter coupling with its own modulated data. The other type of systems use active tags, which do have an onboard battery, so they are larger in size, expensive, have a longer range, reliable reads, and they do have a limited lifetime because of the battery. So what we wanted in our problem statement was full inventory tracking in real time. Ideally, you should have overall visibility. Each object should keep on continuously saying, I'm here, and this should be recorded by the base station. So we constructed our own tag by combining the best of both active and passive tags, which is a small cheap tag with onboard battery, but having reliable reads and a long life. We call our system roll call and our tags pip. The challenges we faced was the first one being obviously long life. You want a radio device which is continuously transmitting for a year or more beacon signals, and your battery is supposed to last over a year. So you have to reduce the energy consumed in the entire system. The second challenge is you're going to have thousands of tags which you're monitoring. So there should be minimum over the air collisions. So you need to reduce the transmission time of these tags. As these tags are being deployed in large quantities, you want these tags to be simple and of low cost. We want to achieve all these challenges while maintaining a low error rate at the base station. So as I've been saying, our roll call system is going to have cheap tags, which can only be achieved if your tag has a low complexity. Your base stations are going to be very few as compared to tags, so they can be complex. What we have here is an asymmetric design. You have tags which are transmit only and base stations which are powerful. What the tag is going to do is it's going to transmit a periodic beacon. The interval between two beacons we have kept to be 1 second, and there's going to be no feedback from the base station back to the tag. all the detection, collision recovery, and processing is going to be done by the base station. Before we have this system running, we assume that all the pips in the room are known to the base station, and an item is considered missing if you do not get a beacon from the corresponding pip after a set amount of time. The main challenge here was to supply this power needed for long-range, reliable, continuous tracking, while keeping your pip small and inexpensive. With this, we come to the thesis task, optimize cost, size, and lifetime across the entire system. This diagram shows a very simple roll call system. You have one tag and one base station. The main components in the tag as well as the base station is a 8051 microcontroller and a CC1100 radio. This radio is completely user programmable. The tag is going to be powered by an on-chip 3.3 volt coin cell, and the size of the tag is approximately slightly bigger than $0.25. Your base station is going to be a development kit from Texas Instruments. What we have, if you look at the tag system, what we have is 3 clocks basically working. You have a separate clock for the radio, which is going to take care of the transmissions. You have a system clock, which is the microcontroller main clock, and a serial clock, which is used to transfer data from the microcontroller to the radio. The serial clock is going to be derived from your system clock. What each pip is going to do is it's going to pack the unique tag ID plus the sequence number of the packet being transmitted using simple packet protocol, and send it out using the program data rate. This packet is going to be received by the base station, demodulated, and the base station is initially going to perform a CRC checksum to know whether the packet is in error or not. Along with the packet, you're also going to get RSSI of the received signal. All this data is going to be passed by the base station to the backend, which is using an RS-232 interface. This backend is going to be running a Java code, which is going to format this data for easy user interpretation. The modulation used in the system is minimum shift keying. This diagram is showing us the power consumed by the system when one beacon is being transmitted. As we have mentioned, power consumption of the system is our main consideration. So your system is going to start off in region A. Region A is the period between 2 beacons. It is the period when the system is not supposed to do anything. After region A, it will jump to region B, where the system is transmitting data from the microcontroller to the radio. Then you have region C, where your radio is turning on and initializing itself. Region D is where your actual communication is taking place. Then we have region E, where after each communication, the radio calibrates itself, and then jumps back to region A for sleep period of 1 second. That's our interval between beacons. Now, when the system was run using the default settings, if the system is run using the default settings, what we find is this is what we get for the energy consumed in the consumed by the system when one beacon is transmitted. All these readings were taken by connecting the pip to a digital oscilloscope and measuring the time taken and the current consumed by the system. If you have a look at this, at the last column here, you can see that maximum energy is getting consumed in region A, which is where the system is actually supposed to do nothing. This is followed by region B, where you're transferring data from the radio, to the radio from the microcontroller. After that, we have region D, where your actual radio transmission is taking place. With these settings, what we had was a battery life of just half a day. So to make this system actually feasible, we had to study each of these 5 states and jointly optimize the performance and the overall energy usage. We have some parameters available for optimization. As we saw that region A, where the system is actually supposed to do nothing, was where maximum energy was being consumed. which means there is some internal functionality going on in the microcontroller, which we have to shut down. Next is your microcontroller clock, the system clock. Uh, it is known that for any microcontroller system, your energy spent is directly proportional to the frequency of operation. You reduce this frequency of operation, you're going to reduce the energy spent here. Which means we can add a second slower clock when your system is sleeping between two beacon intervals. We also saw that region B was having considerable amount of power usage. Region B is where your data is being transferred to the radio, and this is done using the serial clock, the S clock. So we need to find an optimum value of this S clock to minimize the system usage. Finally, we also need to optimize your radio link quality, and we saw that the radio is calibrating itself at the end of each cycle. We need to optimize the energy used here. This is how we went about the optimization. The first row is the system with default setting, which gives you half a day of battery life. The first thing that we did was enable the Wacom radio capability on the CC1100 chip, which made the radio sleep during the interval between two beacons. And when it went into region B, the radio went from the sleep state to the idle state. This majorly affected region A, and we got about 6 days of battery life. We turned off the analog peripherals on the microcontroller, which further reduced the energy spent in region A and gave us about 11 days of battery life. As I mentioned earlier, decreasing the microcontroller system clock is going to give us lower energy consumption. So what we did is we introduced a new clock called a slow clock. So when the system is sleeping between two beacons, you turn on the slow clock and make it count. And when the system wakes up and is actually going to transmit data, you turn on the fast clock. With this, region A and region B were affected, and we got more than 100 days of battery life. We turned off the VDD monitor functionality on the microcontroller, which further increased your battery life to 157 days. We saw region E, which was where your radio was calibrating itself at the end of each beacon transmission. We tested the radio for radio drift and temperature dependence, and we found it to be reliable. So it is not necessary for the radio to calibrate itself every time. We set it to calibrate once every 4 cycles, just because this was the easiest thing to do in software. We might as well set it to recalibrate once in 100 cycles, and then your region E will completely disappear from this graph. Region D, which was where your actual data transmission is taking place. This depends, the width of this region, the time taken will depend on the data rate of transmission. Higher the data rate, better the system will work. So we are running the system at maximum possible data rate, that is 250 kbps. With these settings, we finally got a battery life of 158 days. The data bits transmitted for this experiment was 168, and the calculations are done considering the battery capacity of 220 milliamp hour. After we finished all those optimization techniques, we found that region B was having the maximum power usage. Region B is where your data is getting transferred from the microcontroller to the radio. Your microcontroller is turning on in this state. Your radio is going into the idle state. This region is actually the most complex when it comes to optimizing the energy. Your energy consumed here is going to depend on your system clock, your serial clock, and the amount of data to be transmitted. Your system clock, from your system clock, your serial clock is going to be derived. And it is the serial clock which is going to take care of transmitting data and control from the microcontroller to the radio. What we found was that simply by increasing the clock speed would reduce the time taken for data transmission, but not necessarily reduce the energy spent, because it's going to pull out more current with increasing frequency. What we want to have is balance clock speed and current to have minimum energy consumed. We carried out a number of experiments at different system clocks. For each system clock, we stepped through different values of serial clock to get the optimum pair of system clock and serial clock. What we found was that for optimum minimum energy operation, your serial clock has to be half of the system clock, and your serial clock cannot be more than 6 megahertz. With these settings, this is the table for time taken and the current drawn by the system. If you have a look at the last column, that is the energy spent, we find that initially your energy decreases with increasing frequency, and then it continues to increase. So you are getting kind of a U-shaped curve here. We'll try to analyze this energy spent in the next few slides. So this is a plot of the number of bits transferred on the x-axis and the time spent in region B on the y-axis. Each of these lines shows the operation at a particular system frequency. For each of these configurations, optimum value of serial clock, that is the clock taken to transfer data from microcontroller to radio, was chosen. We can see that each of these lines has a positive slope, which means that you increase the number of bits being transmitted, your time spent in region B is increasing. Also, as we increase the system frequency, the time spent in region B reduces, and at 24 megahertz, that is the maximum frequency of operation, this line has almost zero slope. So what we get here is your system does not care how many bits you're transferring, but it's going to settle down to a constant time of about 300 microseconds. That is the constant time that we get in these equations, which are used to curve fit this graph. This is a plot of the current drawn by the PIP versus the system frequency of operation. As we can see from this graph, your current drawn is proportional to frequency raised to 0.88. Now we will develop the energy model for region B using those graphs. So you have your time spent in region B is the time taken to transfer data, plus the time taken to perform microcontroller operations, plus some constant time for initializations. We saw from the previous graph that your transfer time is directly proportional to the bits being transmitted. And your optimum value of the serial clock is going to be half of that of the system clock. Also, we have the value of current drawn by region B is some term which is proportional to f raised to 0.88 plus some clock independent constant current will be drawn. Plugging both these into the energy equation, this is what we get. As we can see here, you have two terms, your frequency in the numerator as well as the denominator. This is what is giving it that U-shaped. So for lower frequencies, the F term in the denominator is going to be dominant, which is going to decrease the energy used by the system. And as you go on increasing the frequency, your numerator term becomes dominant, which is going to increase the energy used in the system. This is a plot showing the time spent in region B versus the frequency of operation. As you can see, what this graph says is to have the best possible time in region B, operate at maximum possible frequency. If you curve fit it to the equations we derived in the previous slide, we again get the constant time of 300 milliseconds needed for initializations. This plot shows us the energy consumed by region B and the system clock frequency. This is the U-shaped curve I'm talking about, and what this says is that if you want optimum operation, your system needs to work between 4 megahertz and 6 megahertz. We have chosen 6 megahertz as our operating point for our experiments. And now after performing all this optimization, this is what we get for the energy consumed by the system. If you have a look at the last two columns, we can see a drastic change in the energy consumed by the system. Also, now maximum energy is getting consumed in region D, where the actual radio communication is taking place. For this experiment, we used 168 bits of data again. The slow clock, that is the clock it uses between two beacons, is set to 32 kilohertz. The transmit power is 10 dBm. Your system clock 6 megahertz and serial clock 3 megahertz. With these settings, we got a battery life of 159 days. This is a table of the different configurations that we are using. So we have two parameters here, data and the slow clock, which we can change. We did our experiment with 168 bits of data, which means 160 bits of tag ID plus 8 bits of sequence number. 168 bits of tag ID means you have 2 raised to 160 unique tags in the system. For a practical system, 40 bits of data will also be sufficient, which means you have 2 raised to 32 unique tags in the system. So we can reduce this data rate to 40 bits. The slow clock can be reduced further to 8 kilohertz, and with this final configuration of 40 bits and 8 kilohertz, we get a battery life of more than a year. This is the plot showing the percentage of battery used for different configurations. As we can see, for our final configuration, maximum battery usage is occurring in region D, where your actual data transmission is taking place. So now we have a radio link which is using the maximum energy. If we want this link to be reliable, we need it to have lower energy per bit for each transmitted bit. If you do this, we have a flexible system in regards to your range, interference, battery life, and it is possible to use multiple channels. What we are always interested in is end-to-end performance. So we base this tuning on overall error rate and not on the strength of the received RF signal. What we define as error is number of packets lost per 1,000 packets transmitted. The transmitter and the receiver were tuned. The carrier frequency on the transmitter and receiver was tuned using this formula. Now this frequency FX oscillator here is the constant clock on the radio which is used for setting the carrier frequency. This is 26 megahertz. These values are all set using the modem configuration registers for desired operation. To tune the system, we initially configure the base station as a continuous transmitter. We set the carrier frequency to whatever value we want, and then actually confirm the frequency of operation using a spectrum analyzer. Why we need to do this is because what you actually get and what you have actually set it to and what you actually observe is different. This is because your radio, the frequency of the radio is going through a number of multipliers and dividers, which is adding error to the frequency and shifting it. You do the same operation with the PIP. You first set it to a particular frequency and then actually confirm the frequency. Then we vary the frequency up and below this zero error level to find the zero error band. This is zero error band is where reliable communication is going to occur with zero packets in error. This is the result of the experiment when the base station was tuned at 900.28 megahertz. The PIP was made to move from 899.9 megahertz to 900.4 megahertz. What we found here was we have a zero error band of 150 kilohertz. And the center of error band occurred at 900.225 megahertz as opposed to 900.28 megahertz where we actually tuned the system. The experiment was again done by tuning the base station to 902.1 megahertz. Again, you have the same 150 kilohertz zero error band and the center frequency 902.175 megahertz as opposed to 902.1 megahertz. So if we want reliable operation of this system, we need to tune the PIPs to this frequency as opposed to this one.
Tell me what the modulation scheme was exactly?
Minimum shift key.
Okay. And did you apply some, what was alpha or shaping parameter used with MSK?
Actually, we used the default parameters. I didn't change anything.
So was this something that came with the chip or did someone else design that?
The MSK parameters, they came as a package, software package. We haven't played with that part of the radio.
Because I imagine that the 150 kilohertz sensitivity depends on how the signal is shaped.
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah, this 150 kilohertz is actually supposed to be 200 kilohertz according to the registers I set in the previous equation.
what was the nominal bandwidth that this radio requires?
500 kilo.
500.
So as I'm
You have knobs for everything, including the delta, sigma delta converter parameters. And there are knobs for everything. We took those all.
So as I mentioned before, we are going to have a system in which you're going to have hundreds of tags transmitting packets to a base station. So it's highly probable that packets from two different tags collide in air. So we performed this experiment to see how our backend and base stations would behave in case packets from two tags collided. For this experiment, we are using one base station and two tags. We call the tags PIP5 and PIP2. We have set the data rate to 250 kbps. Data transmitted is 168 bits plus the SPP overhead. Power at the transmitter is 0 dBm. We're using MSK modulation with a carrier of 902.1 megahertz. We are making PIP5 transmit after 10.08 milliseconds. So this is the interval between our two beacons. As I said before, our intended interval is actually 1 second, and we are running the system 100 times faster. This was done only to get the statistics in reliable amount of time. PIP2 is transmitting after every 10.083 milliseconds. So as we can see, there's a difference of 3 microseconds in the intervals of the two PIPs. So what we have is your PIP5 is advancing PIP2 by 3 microseconds every period, and in about 3,000 samples, these two tags should go in and come out of collision. We confirmed that when only one of the tags was transmitting, with these settings, there were 0 errors in the received signal at the base station. This is the result of our experiment, of running the experiment for 45 seconds. On the y-axis, you have two levels, error and correct. We say a packet is in error if it fails the CRC checksum or if a packet is not received. As I said, this system is continuous. The pips are going into collision and coming out. So the relative position of both the pips at the 33-second time instant is going to be same as the relative position at the 0-second time instant. What we have here is our region of no collision, where both pips were being seen, and there was perfect reception. We have the region of collision, where none of the pips was being seen, and what you got was garbled data. We also found a new region called the base station dead time, where only one pip was being seen. This was occurring because of the slow RS-232 interface on the base station. What was happening is the receive buffer on the base station was getting overflowed before it could dump data out on the RS-232 interface. This is the same. This is the previous figure with the region of no collisions magnified. The time duration of each of these packets is about 900 microseconds. This is again the same figure with the pips in collision.
Is it because of clock drift in the two transmitters?
Intention. Schizophrenia.
So you applied a clock drift on the experiment?
Yes, 3 microseconds drift. And this is the pips coming out of collision.
It's a way of sampling all of the creatures.
So how can you synchronize the clocks be at precision microseconds?
Sorry?
How do you synchronize the clocks at like 3 microseconds apart?
This was the clock on the radio, on the microcontroller that you said. So
Of each packet, but then each packet got the same. I mean, the first one should be occurring at the same time, right? Otherwise,
no, they were started at random times.
So you transmit now plus delta.
right?
Right, now plus delta, 2 delta, now plus 3 delta. Right, so that's you. And I go whenever I do, plus delta prime,
Yeah.
2 delta
So we
prime.
have different deltas.
Yeah.
But it did not require that our first transmission is across.
No, because it's continuously running.
It's periodic.
Yeah, I mean, she's got 40 seconds like this thing.
Right, I thought the first one you go at the same time.
No.
That was-
This is again the same experiment with your time on the x-axis and the time difference between adjacent packets, adjacent PIP5 and PIP2 packets on the y-axis. Here again we have the region of no collision. When the two packets come closer to each other, we get your base station dead time. What we found was that when the time difference between two adjacent packets received at the base station was less than 3 milliseconds, you have your base station dead time. So what this is doing is it's making the apparent length of the packet to be 3 milliseconds as opposed to 900 microseconds, which is actually supposed to be. When your packets come closer than 900 microseconds, you have the region of collision. This is a plot of the received RSSI at the base station against the time of the experiment. These are the packets, the lowest energy packets are the packets which were not received at the base stations or which were not received at the base station or failed the CRC error. So all the packets here are the ones with correct CRC errors. We can see this time interval from 10 to 20 seconds where we had no collisions. You have RSSI from both the packets being received. During this time, that is 20 to 30 second time instant, that is the base station dead time. Only PIP2 was being seen. And this time instant is where only PIP5 was being seen. You have collisions here where none of the packets were actually received. This is a plot which magnifies the region around the 33 second time instance. So this is where your PIP5 was coming out of collision. So this is how we observe data at the base station. What we have on the y-axis here is bytes of sequence number that were deciphered by the receiver. So at the receiver, the data we got was one by one the bytes of PIP5 were being seen. Actually, after approximately 10 epochs, 1 byte of PIP5 was being deciphered. All these packets were obviously in CRC error. So what we have here is a working energy efficient RFID system monitoring tagged objects with overall visibility. What we achieved was full inventory tracking in real time. For this, we developed our custom-made PIPs, which combined the best features of both active and passive tags. That is, they were inexpensive, small size, many reads, long range, long life. This system was made feasible for deployment by optimizing the energy by careful analysis of each region in its time-dependent current drain. We optimized the firmware to increase the battery life to more than a year from half a day. What we have finally is that major portion of the energy was put into radio communication. That is where your actual data transmission takes place. All this was done while maintaining raw error rates of 0.01% at the base station. Frequency tuning was done to make the radio link reliable by keeping the energy per bit low. Finally, we performed an experiment to see how our system would react in case there were packet collisions. There are a lot of interesting areas in this project. First one of them will be minimizing the base station dead time, which is making the apparent length of the packet to be about 3 milliseconds. Once this is overcome, we can run detailed experiments by deploying hundreds of tags and seeing how the system reacts. We can have data analysis at the back end to predict the instant where each collision is occurring, and then we can have software to recover from them. Right now, there's no direct access to RF signals at the base station. Further, future hardware may provide this for data processing applications. We are using right now simple packet protocol, but it's putting in a considerable amount of overhead. So we can have our own packet protocol, which will have minimum overhead, plus incorporate some form of error correction. The current base station we are using is a development kit from TI. But we saw that both the base station and the PIP have the same basic components. So your base station can actually be replaced by a PIP with some additional circuitry. What we want to achieve is reliable transmission up to 1 Mbps.